Go. Well, welcome to Off Stage with Doug and Ryan, where Doug and Ryan are nobodies, but we're learning a lot from somebodies. And today we've got Tony Burrell, who is the founder and executive director of the Welcome Network, an organization dedicated to upholding the human dignity of vulnerable immigrants and refugees in South Chicago and Northwest Indiana. He served in this role for 11 years, following approximately 15 years with Campus Crusade for Christ. So, Tony, welcome. Love that you're just sparing some time to chat with us. Can you just give us like 30-second elevator pitch for the Welcome Network?
Yeah, basically, we exist to help local churches and in this area to do a better job of welcoming the stranger, welcoming immigrants and refugees, displaced people. So that's maybe 51% of our organization. But how the immigrant community knows us is through the services we provide, specifically legal services and some kind of wraparound housing services for displaced families.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that, and I love the ministry really opportunity that you have in this vein, and it's super practical. So yeah, we'll just start with what led you to go from crew to the Welcome Network.
Well, I won't get into all the details, but life unexpectedly brought me back to my neck of the woods. I was born and raised in Northwest Indiana, and then went off to college in the 90s and ended up in the teens of the 2000s back here. And I had, in the meantime, while I was outside of the area, experienced ministry overseas, and part of that was experiencing the crisis in Kosovo and displacement that Albanian populations had gone through during that crisis. So I had a little bit of understanding of um, displacement and the idea of refugees, but not too much. And coming back to Northwest Indiana, wanted to continue to be part of what my old ministry's main call was to help fulfill the Great Commission. And so, how do you help make Jesus known among the nations in Northwest Indiana? That was kind of my original uh, catalyst for starting the Welcome Network. Now, a lot of that and a lot of my understanding of all of that has changed over 11 years, but that's kind of how it got started.
Well, Doug is on mute, so I will
I
ask.
guess that means it's a question for you, Ryan, I think.
So,
I really, I really appreciate that though. Since you left the opportunity for me, Ryan, so I'm taking it. No, uh, I, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's not really a question as much as, man, Tony, like that's kudos to you because it's like you step into an area that's seems to be so needed in our world today, and it's not, like a political hot button at all. Like it's not sensitive at all to anybody out there.
No, immigrants and refugees, I've never heard of that being controversial or anything.
here's a uh, before we go too far down this. So, Welcome Network is faith-based. You're founder. You're
Yeah.
a believer. You're a Christian. And let's I mean, I'm kind of the guy that let's just call it. Well, it is a polarizing thing, right? It should not be, but the algorithm of our culture is divide people. So, coming from a biblical perspective, give me your 30 seconds of how should the kingdom-minded church view immigration?
Yeah, sure. I think what we talk about, and the first couple of years of my involvement in founding the Welcome Network, what I what I naively came back from global missions thinking was that this is a no-brainer, that the local churches would be embracing the idea of helping to fulfill the Great Commission among the nations who are here and welcoming people. And I quickly began to understand that you cannot, unfortunately, separate a lot of Christianity in the United States with politics. So what we often say is we're too right for the left and too left for the right, but I'm okay with that because what we really want to be is on a different plane completely. We kind of want to be on the kingdom plane, which would not be a left or a right plane at all, but it would be, well, what does the scripture say? What does Jesus want us to do? And so if we start to think about it through that lens, I think a lot of the left-right things in the earthly plane start to kind of melt away, and we can kind of focus on, well, what is our role in the kingdom?
Yeah. So, I mean, I read years ago a book called The Third Way. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it was basically like we've got this idea that there's either like this right side, this left side, or, not even colors and right and left as in politically, just you either do this or you do this. And Jesus often had like this extra option, like you've heard it said, and then he would say, but I'm telling you something different. So I do think that that's a really good challenge for us, not just with immigration, but with anything, kind of the idea of like what are we actually for more than what we're against, right?
Yes, yes. And actually, with our we have a new role that we have one of a staff person focused on storying coordinator, and we're really wanting to focus on positive storying because both sides are taking things from a negative perspective. So oftentimes the right would want us to see maybe immigrants as something to be afraid of. The left might propose them as people who are kind of helpless and needing assistance, but in reality, Jesus wants us to see displaced people kind of like we see ourselves. First Peter chapter 2, in one sentence, Peter calls us chosen people and royal family, and then 2 verses later, he reminds us that we're exiles and strangers here on earth. And so, I think that if we can get away from all of that, and I love how, yeah, I've heard of that book. I need to read it because it sounds like exactly what I'm trying to espouse here.
So in
Do you
your
feel
time,
like,
this is
go ahead.
different than leading kids and students and crew, right? I mean, so how has leadership changed and shifted when you go from sort of youth ministry, if you want to call it that,
Sure.
to like refugee ministry? So like what describe that shift in transition?
Yeah, for a while I thought I was unintentionally leaving the Great Commission behind because Jesus says, "Go and make disciples of all the nations," and that was our, main um, call with the ministry of Campus Crusade for Christ. Now, sometimes it did overlap because if when I was overseas in Eastern Europe, the work we did wasn't always entirely with students, or if it was, there were overlaps with them also facing things like displacement or persecution or stuff like that. But um, the second part of the Great Commission says, "And teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you." And I really think that our ministry with the Welcome Network is I'm my board chair, who's also my pastor, tells me this might not be exactly the way to put it, but I see it almost as a prophetic thing where our ministry exists to challenge the church here to not forget their saltiness and their light so that they can continue to be disciples and make disciples.
I think that's a beautiful picture, really, of the Great Commission. I think we can tend to uh, make it something very, very specific. And even as we were talking earlier about Jesus always creating a third way, that it's much broader, I think, than we give it credit for at times. It's almost like that question of like, for me, it makes me think about that question as I was part of conversations in churches with when I was serving on staff about, like what counts as evangelism or what counts as discipleship, right? And
Right.
and it's like you're trying to like make a metric out of something, and not that those are bad, they're important, but like you can make it so specific that it doesn't you miss the bigger picture of what Jesus was calling us to do. And this is, I, I believe, absolutely very much a part of it. So what, so I love that image of kind of a prophetic voice for the church. How is this being received? Like, what has been the journey for you? 11 years you've been doing this. What's the journey been like for you, in being this voice for the immigrant?
Yeah, thank you. And to go back to what you were saying, everybody likes numbers. I mean, when we had our 10th anniversary, we had to go back and figure out numbers because numbers are kind of are important, you know. So
Mhm.
the map behind me, we kind of figured all that out back in 2024. We've here in Northwest Indiana, we've served 1,600 families from 87 countries who are here in the Chicagoland area coming to us for services. And so, you know, numbers do tell somewhat of a story because, you know, whether you're in you know, North Central Indiana or Chicago or some other part of the United States, you know, in most parts of the United States, what the census would call the foreign-born population is higher than we might think, and probably more prevalent than you might see driving down the road. Um, and I kind of blanked on your main question there, Doug. If you don't mind, kind of bringing
Oh
me back.
no, no, that's good. I mean, that's always, I think it's important. That's even that, not necessarily going down that trail, but the conversation surrounding you as a leader and trying to put the right things before people is really important to help communicate the vision. I was asking really about what your experience has been in really being a prophetic voice for the church, really a
Right.
challenging voice for the public and public sentiment regarding, an issue like immigration.
Yeah. You know, ups and downs. To be completely honest, you know, and having becoming friends with denominations that I maybe didn't have much interaction with when my work was mainly, you know, overseas and proclamation based. But having a broader perspective of who can be a partner here with us,
Mm.
and so kind of
Yeah.
a more, you know, I don't really, I'm not sure about the word ecumenical, but just the idea of working with you know, anybody who claims to follow Christ, and in some cases that might mean still being, you know, uniquely who we are. I mean,
Right.
I would, I guess, now call myself post-evangelical. I'm not sure what I would call myself anymore, but come squarely from an evangelical perspective. And so, you know, if somebody wants to come alongside and partner with us, they know what they're getting is, you know, people who are coming from the evangelical tradition. And if they want to partner with us, we're rarely going to say no as long as we can continue to be who we are in that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. What has been for you? I know it may be hard to like get to narrow down, but for you, what's been the most challenging and what's been the most rewarding for you in this journey?
The most challenging, you know, I joke around when I hear somebody starting a nonprofit, and I just say, you know, you should have talked to me first. You know, I think that it, in many cases, probably makes more sense to continue doing the work of the Lord under your local church or under your denomination or something like that, because it is a labor to begin something, and not having like an MBA or those types of qualifications, not coming from a corporate world. You know, in 11 years, the work that we do there's years where it grows exponentially, and then there are a lot of growing pains, both knowing how to manage people, knowing how to shepherd staff, knowing how to partner with churches. So it's just tiring sometimes to do that. But the greatest reward are obviously the people that we get to come alongside, the stories that we get to be a part of. Um, you know, we are fellow strangers here. And when I started doing the work 11 years ago, you know, the sad part of numbers is there were maybe the estimate was 60 million displaced people in the world. 11 years later, unfortunately, despite work that, you know, organizations like ours are doing, there's 110 or 120 million displaced people in the world today. So uh, the the issue or the complexity, the sad parts are not going away, but we get to be part of people's stories, and that's a beautiful thing.
What it what is one that just comes to your mind right away, like that you're able to share with some sort of, anonymity?
Yeah,
Like,
sure. I don't even need to be so anonymous about this one. One of our board members, her name is Sveta, and she's from Ukraine. She came legally here with her family during about 3, 4 years ago. There was a program called United for Ukraine, and so people here in the States at the time could sponsor Ukrainians to come over, and they would receive work authorization for 2 years and things like that. So Sveta and her family are here because of a sponsorship that came through a partner of the Welcome Networks, and so we were able to offer them housing in our welcome homes for about 12 months, and it was her and her husband Ivan and their 3 kids, and we didn't know this, but we had to bring a dog from Europe as well, so that was a learning process of getting the dog their credentials or whatever you need to bring a dog from Europe. And but unfortunately, sadly, she lost her brother in the war over there. And so if they had stayed, her husband would almost certainly have been in the same situation. So they ended up leaving Ukraine, and they're here in the States, and they're in a process of hopefully becoming able to be here permanently. But she doesn't focus on herself. Even though she has this story and this background, she plugged into one of our local churches here. She is serving in that church. She's a leader in that church, and she's on our board and helping us to do the work that we do. And so, people like Sveta are inspirations to me, and I'm happy that part of her story aligns with the Welcome Network.
Do you find that the local church connection is instrumental in the whole process?
Yes, for 100%. And I won't discount that a lot of that is that most of our funding comes from individuals and churches.
Sure.
So, I think last year only 8% of our funding was through government channels, and that's still related to work that we do with some Afghans who were evacuated several years ago. But, over 92% of our income of our revenue last year. Um, well, a large percentage of our revenue last year came from churches and Christian individuals who believe in what we do. So there's that part. But also, yes, when we have a family that comes into our housing program, which we call the Welcome Homes, we try to align them with a church in the area. We're kind of renaming things, but we've been calling it foster churches. And so a church will come alongside a newcomer family that's been displaced that receives housing through us, and that church can become part of that family's story. And sometimes it would maybe just mean sitting down with them and practicing English once a week. For a lot of the churches, it's inviting them to church, and many of the families have grafted into churches here. It's not a requirement, and we don't make that anything like a requirement or whatever. But when the churches are involved, if they are following Christ, they're hopefully going to be invitational in their approach as well.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. I think it's super good reminder of the power of the local church, and really, and I've served both in nonprofits and served within the church, but just the idea that we're not separate, right? That we're really all of God's people, kingdom of God at work on earth, um, and the power for people connect people from churches connecting with the immigrant or connecting with people. When I served at a ministry to the homeless, that was the most powerful part. I mean, we would have groups that would come in certainly and do serve dinner, and some of them would kind of stay removed, stay behind the counter, but the most certainly the people that were most impacted were the ones that got out from behind the counter and came out and shared a meal with somebody or just sat down and talked with them. And because once you learn someone's story or you start knowing someone personally, then then it's not just an issue that's just like out there and like removed from you personally. Then you're like, no, when I hear that issue, I see this person.
Yeah.
I think that that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
I
We
did
even, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we even,
no,
it's the same with our kids too, who are kind of our number one disciples, right? We're probably called to try to make disciples from our children first. And we took our four kids, this was a couple years ago when there was the buses being bussed into the major cities. And so we took our four kids to Chicago. A lot of Afghans and a lot of Venezuelans and Colombians were being brought on buses from the border, and their first stop would be police precincts in Chicago. And so we told the kids,
mm,
hey, a church had given us a bunch of winter items, gloves and scarves and coats, and some of the people from the church were going to come along with. So we took a few van loads of people and materials, but we put the kids in the car too, and they were very afraid for the first walking up to this large crowd of people that are not familiar to them. But within 5 minutes, that was all just melted away, and we were able to get gloves to people and just super friendly people. And our kids left with a completely different
mm,
perspective than
yeah.
they did before they had encountered this. And even to the point where my oldest, she's 17, she's a junior in high school, and she's talking about immigration law. And you know, I'm like, oh, don't, did I make a disciple too well? I mean, is there any other thing you might want to do with your life than follow in my footsteps? Because it's got its ups and downs, but at the moment, that's at least indication that hopefully we're doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah, I love too that you mentioned that's a great I mean, perfect example with using with the kids. I also think it's great that you referenced in the story about trying to figure out how to get the dog over, because I mean, of all the things that people probably would think about that you have to deal with, that's probably not something that people would have brought up. And so I guess I'm kind of wondering, like, how is your even like how has this shaped your leadership over the years? I'm sure this has even changed how you lead or what you focus on or what you think is most important in leadership.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I do is more informed by trauma that people have gone through. And that's not just the people we're serving or coming alongside, but my staff, myself, all of us have been through stuff, and we need to maybe put ourselves in the other shoe to lead with humility, to lead with a lot of open space, to try to trust that people are not coming at us from the wrong perspective. So I think a lot of it is based on that. I've I've uh, I've preached that my family and I mean, the six of us would probably be the worst displaced people if we were thrown into another country. There'd be so much we would be like high maintenance types of displaced family. And so if we can simply put ourselves in the position of a humble approach, a humble position, that would be, I think, one big thing that I've learned. Also, again, just trying to understand the other perspective. So whether I'm working with a church that's completely on board because they tend to lean left politically, or whether I'm trying to reach out to a church that may lean the other direction, just trying to be a representative of Christ rather than a representative of human organizations is probably something I'm continuing to learn as well.
Yeah, so we want to talk a little bit about that resilience of just like, I mean, as a pastor, when you're leading a church, you you get criticism and different things. So I know it looks different for you, but before I ask that, I'm curious, like at least for me and Doug, we're both in pretty rural context. So we see headlines, right? We follow stuff, but it doesn't, at this point in history, it doesn't feel like it impacts us as much. Now, when I was living in Fort Wayne, there was a large Burmese influx for a season.
Hmm.
So I saw that. But in Wabash, I mean, we're pretty look-alike congregations, if you want to call that. I mean, you know what I'm saying. But
Sure.
like what would you say to like rural Christians that are like, well, this doesn't impact me? Like, how should we view how we pray, lead, and how can we engage? Because I mean, whether other than just monetarily, we're not going to come in contact with very many Venezuelans or Haitians in Wabash.
Sure, sure. That's a really good question. Part of it reminds me that Jesus likes to operate in more borderland or liminal spaces. You think about the story of the 10 lepers that he healed. He was walking along the border of Samaria and Judea, I guess, and a lot of what he did was kind of in these in between spaces where you wouldn't really expect to encounter the stranger or encounter a need. And so I would say even probably in Wabash, there just being open is if there's somebody new on your block, even if they're not from another country, start to practice the idea of welcoming and hospitality, because I think that you will find your eyes being open to people who are other or not from, not aligned exactly with where your local population might be coming from. But um, so that might be the first thing, is just to kind of keep your eyes open for ways to be welcoming and hospitable re to resurrect kind of the lost Christian discipline of hospitality a bit more. Um, I would say also maybe realizing that a lot of our fear is probably, well, a lot of our apprehension about the other or the stranger is based on fear, and to realize that we probably need both um, both sides of the spectrum to kind of be balanced, to understand maybe where Jesus wants us to be with issues that are controversial like immigration. So, for example, one organization that I like is called the Evangelical Immigration Table, and they do want Christians to they advocate toward our politicians, and what they advocate is, yes, we do as Christians believe that there should be forms of law. There should be law. The country should operate under order in general, and so yes, the EIT would say, yes, we are for strong border security. We are for people following the law. And we also need to advocate for immigration change, for comprehensive reform, for laws that have not been changed in 60 or 70 years, for a compassion, especially for displaced people who sometimes have been displaced partly due to the fact that we have security as a country. The fact that we have such strong security as the United States partly causes insecurity sometimes for other people, and to realize that it can be a both and situation. So, you know, so much of, I think, what it is, the third way is often both and so in this last 12 months, if you go down and talk to CBP people who are working down at the border, the part of the Department of Homeland Security, they have sealed that border so well that there are so few apprehensions in the last 6 months that we might be able to go back to our politicians and say, okay, good job sealing the border, but now let's open back up some of the compassionate humanitarian routes that Jesus probably also wants us to be concerned with. So maybe advocacy would be another thing for people in the smaller communities who maybe are not encountering, they're not close enough to an organization like ours to be volunteering on a daily basis, but to understand the both and nature and to be advocating for that.
Yeah, I love your heart behind this because as I'm listening to this, I'm like, so much even of media is driven by fear, right? Like
Yeah,
everybody wants us to be afraid and to pick a side. And you talk about trauma, and the reality is like we're all impacted by it in different scales and different amounts of that. Part of the reason I lean one direction, you lean a direction, maybe it's the same, maybe it's different, is because of our upbringing, the things we've experienced, right? Like, if I got beat up by somebody one time when I was younger, and then I'm scared of him, and if I see someone that looks like him, I'm scared of them. So
right.
and you're right. It's perfect love casts out fear. And when we can see people the way Jesus sees them, then we can let those guards down and say, hey, maybe you're not here the way it was supposed to happen, right? Even politically, right? But you're here and you're
Right.
right next to me and God cares about you. So I'm going to just, like you said, be hospitable and figure out how I can love you while you're here. And
Exactly.
I think that that's okay. Like none of us are perfect. None of us did everything perfectly to be where we are. And I've just been challenged by Malcolm Gladwell's, kind of view of like none of us picked where we were born.
Right.
Right? Like I didn't pick to be born in America to have some of these great advantages, privileges that I have. Didn't deserve them. We know because of Jesus, we didn't deserve any of that anyway. So who am I to go, well, you're not where you're supposed to be, right? We're like you said, we're all strangers in a foreign land, and heaven is our home, not this place. So until then, I think hospitality is a real big key. So um talk about how we can be. I mean, you've said some, but I mean, maybe give us three practical ways. Advocacy is one, but maybe a couple other ways that as the Church of Jesus Christ that we can be hospitable.
Yeah. I would say if you're anywhere close to a community college or a university, then there's going to be probably programs where you could become an English practice partner with an international student, or just investigate even at your local library. There's often citizenship classes or things like that, so they might need some help in those areas. So I would say explore volunteering opportunities, and if you don't know of any in your area, then message me, email me, because I can probably help you find some in your area. I mentioned the Evangelical Immigration Table. My friend Christy Stats works with something called the National Immigration Forum, which part of that is uh, Bibles, Bibles, Badges, and Business, which is kind of a left and right together, both and approach to immigration reform. But also the RHPNA, it stands for the Refugee Highway Partnership North America. Our conference, we have an annual conference. This time it's split by region, so it's just the Midwest Great Lakes part of us. But on September 27th, we're meeting for a day in Grand Rapids to just and get a chance to meet 80, 100, 120 people who are all Christians and we'll worship together. We'll hear from a couple pastors who are working with displaced people, and you'll have a chance to meet others who are working in the Great Lakes with displaced people. So it's probably not that hard to get involved and plug in, even if you feel like you're from a smaller place. And then finally, I would maybe say just a selfish plug, but go to our website, thewelcomenet.org. We're having a 5K run walk in Lansing, Illinois, in October, but you could do it remotely too. There's a fundraising way where you can run or walk yourself and ask people to sponsor you, and then you could raise funds for the work that we're doing as well. And if it's not us, World Relief, World Vision. I mean, there's so many organizations that are working with displaced people, and that's the main heart, is to just be coming alongside or finding a way to be having an impact with the 120 million people in the world today that, because of war or violence or persecution, have been forced from their homes.
Yeah, I think those are super good ways, especially someone that's really trying to explore how to engage and how to be involved. Good ways to do that. And I think one of the things that may be surprising to some folks anyway, that there's probably more going on around you and in your local area than you realize. Even here in Joplin, there's actually a ministry too, for immigrants, particularly the Afghan community that had a number of people come into our community. So it's, people are here, right? And I was thinking back too, when you referenced the Great Commission about, go and make disciples of all the nations, and how God has orchestrated in such a way. I say God, but he's using this opportunity where the nations are actually coming to us, right? That, you don't have to go very far for that to happen. You mentioned again the number 110 million. Is that what you said? Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you, in leading particularly the Welcome Network, but personally, like when there's so much need, I mean, it's just, the numbers can be pretty crazy. And you add to that kind of it's kind of this cultural moment that we're in which that's such a political hot button, and all sides are fighting about this issue. How do you deal with the overwhelming nature of it? How do you not grow complacent, or how do you not go a different direction? How do you stay on this mission?
Yeah. I think for some of my colleagues, burnout maybe is the other. It's not complacency, maybe it's burnout or depression about it, because it is kind of a big um, unsolved, unsolvable maybe crisis. I mean, the poor will always be with us, and I think part of that is displacement and the idea that the kingdom is not here at the moment, at least not in the most visible way that it will one day be. Um, Balance. I do unplug. I don't usually give clients my cell number. There are ways that you can kind of keep balanced so that you don't burn out. And I also remember, I mean, you mentioned the nations are here, they're coming. I mean, when I became a Christian in the early 90s, one of the first things people told me to do was start praying for this part of the world, the 1040 window, where
Mm.
2 billion to 3 billion people have never heard about Jesus. And I think what the Christian community thought as they were praying is that somehow the regimes in those countries would fall, that we'd be able to send the crazy missionaries, not ourselves, but the crazy missionaries who could go and maybe have an impact in that part of the world. Instead, what has happened is, if you look at the list of countries who comprise most of the refugees we've accepted over the last 30 years into the United States, a lot of overlap between the names of those countries and the area of the 1040 window where the unreached people are coming from. So just remembering that to welcome the stranger is often a way that the Lord might be giving you an opportunity to help fulfill the Great Commission, or just to be part of that process. And yeah, and Doug, I would say it's just one family at a time. If I start thinking about
Mm.
the numbers, then I'm probably gonna give up.
Yeah, yeah. And I think even what you said, yeah, one family at a time. That's good. That's good. So what do you do? What do you do to unwind? How are you at creating boundaries?
Yeah, better than I was before, I think. Like to ride my bike a lot, have buddies in church who I'll ride my bike with, up the Lake Michigan shoreline and things like that. Um, Enjoy time getting away with my family, traveling, enjoying good drinks of all kinds. Just just again, having balance and knowing that, okay, if the Lord had me working from 9 to 6 today, that's enough, and I can come back and do it again tomorrow. So you know, there are days where we have to be more open. I mean, in times where, the Afghan evacuation happened, or other times you might be picking up a family from the airport at 2 a.m. because that's just what happens. But and so you do also need to be flexible with those boundaries enough to know when, a family's in need. I mean, the Lord knew that too, but he also got away to those quiet places when he needed to.
Yeah.
Talk talking about just like what you're doing now, I'm guessing hasn't always been what you did. You mentioned earlier, like in some conversation we had about 2013, 2014, just some personal things even recently that maybe you didn't handle as well, vitality wise, or, talk a little bit about just your personal trauma as willingly as you're, openly as you're willing to be, but and
Sure.
just what you've learned in leadership from coming out of those things.
Yeah, well, I think that my number one, um, and I think the Lord has it like this for us, but for me, my wife is um, my partner in life, and she brings so much refreshment to my life, and it's not the boundaries thing, but just kind of the counterbalance to being drained here through serving people or through leading the organization, and then being able to come home and of course try to be an encouragement to her as well and to our kids as well. So not just taking, but I think if just realizing that you know, I used to have the mentality, and this came from maybe when I was a young believer, and I think it was a little bit, maybe somebody else might have a different mentality, so I'm not going to say that this is right or wrong, but it was like master, mission, mate, and or master, mission, and then me. But my mate would fall under the me part, where she would kind of also be lumped down at the bottom sacrificially. And I don't really think that that's, at least for me, not the healthy approach. Master, yes, master number one, but then there are even days where I might have to take off from work because mate and family are going to be the higher priority that day. And so that is something it took me a while in life to learn, and it did cause a bit of trauma in my life.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's been a positive change that I've noticed over the years, in the sense of, I do remember kind of what you're referencing, that heavy emphasis on well, almost like, that old school philosophy that, I'm gonna go I'm gonna go do what God called me to do over here, and he's gonna take care of my family. And 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 there's been a switch, or a swing anyway, I think, in a positive direction, to say, well, your family is your mission, and your family is your ministry.
Yeah.
And that Jesus does it, we're not sacrificing our family at the altar of ministry, right? Or at the family of the mission, that they're with us in this journey, like
Yeah.
they're part of it.
And ironically, I think that a lot of it was stemmed not from some well-placed theological construct, but it was just ambition or the desire inside of me to do something big or to lead something well. And ironically, that caused the first part of my life to not go well. And when I kind of laid that down, the Lord kind of put this Welcome Network stuff in my hands, and I do believe that he has a role for this organization, but if he called me tomorrow to something else, I don't think I would be too sad about that. I think that he has rearranged priorities in my life to the point that um, I only have to play for him.
uh,
And I'm
that's
still
good.
learning that. I mean, I haven't perfected it, but you guys know what I mean.
Well, I mean, if you had, you'd write a book about it, and then it'd be a bestseller. So yeah, and so to that end, I think that's uh of the idea of surrender. And I like how you said that about, you wouldn't be too sad about it, or that because you're surrendered, and so if he's leading this, then it's the best way to go.
Yeah.
What do you do, what do you do to stay, connected to Jesus, spiritually healthy in your life?
Yeah, I mean, often meeting with guys, whether that's riding the bike or just going out for coffee and making sure that there's people in my life I can go to if I need something. Lately, there's an app I've been using called Pray As You Go. It's actually from a Catholic tradition, but so very occasionally there might be stuff that I just kind of think about something else at that point, but mostly it's kind of a there's a song at the beginning, and then there's a scripture and the good questions that they ask you to think about, and then they'll repeat the scripture, and almost a little bit like an examine type of thing. So just getting those moments every day to reflect, and then it usually changes my perspective a bit. Um, haven't had a sabbatical ever, and so I'm thinking in 2026 of taking a little time off and trying to focus a little more strongly on those types of rhythms. Yeah.
Um, I was chuckling when you were talking about the balance, because when I was young and dating my wife, who I eventually married, I was in a Christian rock band, and I had been indoctrinated to that same like tier of. And one of my first conversations with her, I said, "Just want you to know, you'll never be more important than the band, because that's my ministry." Right. But it's funny, it's hilarious now, like God's grace, and we got married and everything's fine now. But same thing. I mean, somewhere along the line, it was like your ministry is the most important thing, and we forget that our family is our number one ministry.
Yeah.
Like, what good is it if I baptize 150 people here at this church and my own kids don't know the Lord?
Yeah.
Like, it's not that I failed because lots of people have children that rebel or whatever, but I mean, that should be the most important place. And so I like the way you restructure that of like master, mate, family, nucleus, family, and then whatever God's called you to. Because, like you said, tomorrow he may call you to something else. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
very wise.
It's good, Ryan. Thanks for being vulnerable there.
Yeah.
No,
Uh,
it's another conversation not on the podcast. I'll ask you about the rock band.
yes, sir. So what are you what are you reading? I We like to ask personally what you're reading, watching, and listening to, but before you answer that, I just think you have a niche that a lot of our viewers are going to have no clue where to even start. So like give us, I know you mentioned that conference, give us like some things we could read, um, some things we could watch, some things we could listen to that will sort of help us find that biblical worldview of God's concern for refugees.
Yeah, I didn't bring the stuff written down, and the things lately are entering my brain and leaving my brain a little too easily. But Matthew Sorens and Jenny Yang have written a good book. They're with World Relief. I'm blanking on the name of it, but Matt Sorens and Jenny Yang, that book that they've written is a good start. Oh, and there's two brothers. One of them's in Vancouver, one of them's in Australia. What is their one? I think it's called Refugees Revisited or something like that. And that is a really good book. Maybe this
Was
is
the one was the one Tony seeking refuge on the shores of the global refuge crisis?
yes, yes. So
Okay.
that's probably one of the Matt Sorens has written two of them, but
Okay.
that's one of those.
That's one. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Oh,
And then,
welcoming the stranger, another one.
yeah.
Yeah.
And shoot, they're in my other room, but I don't really want to take a pause to go get them. But the
Yeah.
the two brothers, I think it's called Refugee Revisited, but or Resettlement Revisited or something like that. But that's been a good one as well. Then there, oh, my wife would laugh at me right now. Even just the movies like I think I think it was Reese Witherspoon. Uh, and she starred in a movie about um, some displaced people who had come into the St. Louis area, and she was like a caseworker. Just to kind of those are some things that kind of replace in our minds a healthy perspective that takes away some of the fear, but it also does. That the thing about that movie is it shows it's not all smooth. I mean, when two cultures are coming together, and one has been through a lot of trauma, and we're trying to come alongside them. There are power dynamics, there's trauma, there's all sorts of stuff. There's our own selfishness, there's the way we do things as Americans compared to how we need to learn to do things to kind of come alongside people from different cultures. So, um,
Is
sorry.
that one called the is that the good lie? Is it called the good
Yes.
lie?
Yeah, the good lie. Thank you. So you guys are doing the research for me. I'm sorry, and I'll
Hey,
be better prepared next time. But
oh no, that's what we're here for.
and if you ask me what I'm reading right now, I'm probably going to give you a similarly poor answer. Uh, but I do think that there are things that we can feed our minds with, especially with welcoming the stranger. There's good resources out there.
What do you personally like to read? Like if you're not necessarily feeling like you have to read it. What do you want to read?
Um, Things that challenge my perspective, like like Ryan mentioned, the third way. Um, like maybe people that I wouldn't necessarily recommend to my kids, but that challenge me a bit, like Richard Rohr,
Hmm.
um, and 25 years ago, maybe Brian McLaren. I mean, these are people that maybe theologically I don't 100% agree with, but they bring a perspective to me that slows me down. I do like getting into the rhythms of um, like Jesuit types of prayer or examine types of prayer. So even those like little booklets where every day it's a different version of the examine prayer where I can go through it at the end of the day and think through, how I can continue to grow.
Yeah, that's excellent. I love that too. Just things that challenge us. And it kind of goes back. I think sometimes people, yeah, like even some of the authors you mentioned, some people get a little bit, like, oh, we shouldn't read them. I'm like, well, I think if we can be fear can drive us to not read something because I don't know what, like we're afraid we're like gonna agree with somebody. I don't know,
Yeah.
and I totally like with Richard Rohr, I've read some of his more recent stuff and I was like, oh dang, I don't really like that direction and don't agree with that, but he does have a good perspective on some things, on some things, just letting the Holy Spirit in our own lives kind of guide that is, I think, healthy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Doug,
afraid, and I was afraid to even mention names because then people might put me in a camp. But I mean, Keller has been an amazing. I read a lot of Keller and listened to a lot of sermons, and I think he quoted Malcolm Gladwell so much. I mean, just the idea, it's from Keller where I heard what Ryan quoted earlier. Just you know, what how did the Welcome Network come about, and how much did I really have responsibility for that? I mean, I didn't choose where I was born. I didn't choose that I became a believer through, somebody sharing the gospel with me in college. I didn't choose that in high school my parents had the means to send me overseas for a couple of weeks in the summer to give me a perspective that was different than maybe someone else's. I mean, so we don't anything that can challenge that idea, whether it's Keller or Rohr or anybody like that. I'm open to being kind of knocked out of my comfort zone when needed.
and it's crazy. Like, I don't know. I could do a whole nother podcast with you sometime now that I know more about, because I feel like I have better questions now coming on the end of this. But it is crazy, this a lack of humility, because Doug, I mean, everything you say I agree with, right? So I mean, it's interesting because I find myself the older I get being like way more aware of how much I don't know. And a podcast I listened to recently, the guy said, every time I find out I'm wrong, it's actually a gift.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Because like you learn that you were actually wrong about something, but now you're right about it, or now you have a different understanding of it. And I think that humility would just be so good for every leader to understand that like not everything I've ever said from the stage in my church has been biblically perfect.
Yeah.
And you would be a fool to say, well, Ryan said, like test it
Oh,
up to the word of God.
Yeah.
oh yeah, and I look occasionally I'll have a chance to read something I preached 10 years ago, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right.
So much grace. There's so much grace.
That's right. Yeah, and I think even what you said is just a real dynamic in our world. I especially for someone in your role, you're leading an organization, you want to represent well. It's an important cause. There's ramifications if a church gets upset with one particular thing you say, but what you were saying about not wanting to be lumped into with a group of people, man, that's so like even already on some of the conversations that Ryan and I have had, it's not like we're going to agree what we've been talking about. It's not like we're going to agree 100%. And
Right.
in conversation with someone may say something that I may have just a different viewpoint on, but it's not my stage to say that. I'm just having the conversation and trying to understand their perspective, take what we can learn and grow from, and then leave the rest. But this whole and there's been so many other authors or people that said this, but like the lost art of even just conversation with people is tragic, right?
Yeah. Mm.
So
Well
so
said.
on the as we're wrapping up, but well, I wasn't gonna let you get away with this or away from this, Tony, because we did ask you this ahead of time, and you did write down. So watching wise, Food Network,
Okay.
Abbott Elementary, The
Uh-huh.
Bear, and
Yeah.
rewatching X Files. I was like, oh yeah, X Files, I'm with you. I don't get into
Yeah.
the Food Network as much, but I love it. I love it.
So any
Very
of your listeners can now put me into whatever camps they want to based on everything I've said.
good Cubs or a Sox guy.
Oh, great. You're gonna put me there too. Cubs since birth. Cubs
Thank
since
you.
birth. Yeah. And Bears
Uh,
too. Around here there's enough Packers fans. You have to kind of say if your Bears or Packers, but I'm Bears for sure. So
when I was in Northwest Indiana serving at a church there, our lead guy, I was like, this guy gutsy. So you're in Chicagoland in the region, and if he was going to pick a team, he would pick the White Sox. And so there would be some of that would come out of the message. So I think that in part that's a little gutsy, right? Not that he should have to be neutral, but like really at his heart, he was a Cardinals fan. And so he would just like mock like the Cubs. And I'm like,
yeah,
I think I'm getting ready to duck. There's gonna be stuff flying.
right.
Yeah,
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 you don't mention the Cardinals around here, Doug.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Uh, well, as we wrap up, I just want to give you the last word and really probably just say maybe just this. Like if you're have the chance, you get in an elevator and with somebody and they say like, oh, the welcome network, and then they say something regarding immigration, just what would you say to them, like why you should care?
Yeah, I mean, if they're close by, I would say, well, why don't you come and shadow something at our office one day and just hear some of the stories. Just encouraging people to actually hear stories, get into a story of somebody would be probably changing their experience a bit. And honestly, I would probably try to build a bridge and agree with some aspect of what they're coming from to then probably try to offer a counterpoint as well. But it's been a real pleasure, Doug and Ryan. Thank you so much for asking questions that have been helpful, I think, and letting me tell a little bit of the story of the Welcome Network in my life as well. And I it makes me actually I'm going to listen to some of your podcasts, other ones, and I'm gonna whatever you. I'm not really a podcast person, but I have from time to time. I know enough when I was listening to all the Keller stuff, so I will find you guys and add you guys to the roster.
And if you ever have
Awesome.
an opportunity in Fort Wayne, like reach out to me. I would love to be in a room and see what you're doing.
Actually, yeah, at the end of September is our first event in Fort Wayne because we are expanding to Fort Wayne, and we're going to have a Know Your Rights seminar at a church there. That's with the legal services part of what we do.
You know what church?
First something. So I will I'll get it to you on email.
Cool.
It's the welcomenetwork.org, right? Where we find you?
Thewelcomenet.org.
The
The
welcomenet dot the
yeah,
welcomenet.org.
yeah.
Awesome.